Hello, everybody. It is John Pollock and Brandon Thurston with another week of Pollock and Thurston here on Wednesday, August the 30th. Brandon, we have lots to talk about today. We're going to be going over in depth Emergence, NWA's 75th anniversary card, and then we are going to be teeing
There's an MLW show coming up too.
All of that, and we've got a great guest. We're going to go match by match through all of that. But without further ado, the man that is joining us, I'm sure everybody here very familiar with all of his great work over at Fightful.com, and the birthday boy, no less, Sean Ross Sapp is
it's your
joining
birthday
us today. It is his birthday.
Happy birthday.
Pro spending a bit of his birthday with myself and Brandon Thurston. But happy birthday, Sean, and thanks so much for jumping on with us. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It means a lot that you guys asked me.
So I will obviously get into all of the chaos that is going on. But for you, I mean, this was last week. Brandon and I finished this show, and within 10 minutes, it was the news of Terry Funk's passing. And it feels like 2 months have passed since last week. You're covering all of this, and you're going across the ocean for All In. Just overall, what have the last 7 days been like for you from the reporting side, as well as with travel thrown in there with everything that's gone on?
A roller coaster, man. I mean, much like you guys, Jimmy Van and I were on the air for the aptly named Hump last Wednesday. And around the end of the show, you know, Ric Flair always breaking that news. Like, and when it's Rick, you always have to go, okay, he's known to blurt out things, but he's also got a pretty good connection. I mean, quite honestly, he was the first person that heard about Bray as well that I had heard of via a mutual contact. And unfortunately, the Terry Funk news was confirmed. Unfortunately, the next day, the shocking news about Bray out of nowhere after a couple weeks ago, I had people in WWE saying, hey, we got creative plans in order for this guy. Like, we're in September, we're thinking about bringing him back. And at that point, I'm talking with WWE about, hey, you know, I'm supposed to go to this Undertaker thing tonight. Is it in poor taste if I attend this, if I cover this? Like, is it going to happen? And they're like, no, if anything, he'll want to say stuff about Bray and Terry. And on the way there, I get a call from someone who wanted the cause revealed. And that is gutting news to hear, but gutting news to relay as well. And to get that responsibility, it is.
This was family.
Yeah, family in the company. Yeah. And I was initially told, oh, well, we don't necessarily want it to say from this person. I was like, listen, guys, there's zero chance I put that out there without saying I have permission. There's just no way, because that's just not my wheelhouse. It's not something I would ever do. That's information for the family and or the company to put out there in conjunction with the family. And that was, I thought, as intense as it was going to get. And really it was. I mean, nothing's more intense than what happened with Bray. And
it does put all of this stuff into perspective. Like, we are going to talk about all the all-in stuff. In the grand scheme of it, it's like, it's wrestling BS stuff that we are dealing with. They're important on the business level. I'm not going to downplay it, but I mean, we are coming off, an utter tragedy in Bray Wyatt and with Terry Funk, like a beloved figure passing on as well. You compound it all together, and it was just a whirlwind of news for that period. When you were in England, sort of, was there, pre All In, were you certainly getting the vibe that this was almost like, here you have these competing emotions, that here's this big celebration aimed for Sunday, and you're coming off, these very tragic stories that sort of, it definitely just cast a shadow on everything, that you had this wrestling community in mourning at the same time?
I think SmackDown helped a lot. It helped people get a lot of emotions out there and share a lot of things. And I think that Sunday was going to be sort of a bit of that healing process. You know what I mean? Like, this is the type of thing that Bray Wyatt loved, that the man behind it loved. He loved to perform, loved to entertain. And this is one of the most perfect examples of entertaining an audience that wrestling has ever seen, quite frankly, with the records that it set and the level of hype that it had. So I felt like it was going to be a part of that healing process. And despite all the crazy stuff that happened, I feel like it sort of still was, because I mean, it was a really good show, I thought.
I thought so too. I think that historically it's going to be looked back upon as just such a significant event, not just in the company's history, but a major milestone in wrestling history, at least of this century, in a post WCW world, in terms of a non WWE company running a major stadium show at this level and to this success that we'll also get into. So for your setup at All In, are you in the crowd? Are you in a media box? Because giant news is about to fall on your lap, and I'm kind of curious from you: is it a benefit to be at the scene of the crime, so to speak, or is this complicating matters for you as you're reporting in real time?
Funny enough, to my right was Denise Salcedo, who I adore, wonderful woman who works hard. To my left is Brian Alvarez and Dave Meltzer. So. I'm not going to pretend like I speak with them often, but I conferred with them like a minimal amount about what was happening. I leaned over and I was like, Jack Perry and CM Punk. And Brian's like, oh, yeah. Yep. And this was minutes after the show went off, and somebody sent me a message and they said, you're about to have another brawl out night. And it honestly wasn't that bad. Wasn't nearly as bad as that. I mean, we're talking about 2-3 in the morning for that night compared to middle of the afternoon, because I didn't get off Eastern time when I went over there. I was like, I'm just staying. I had a feeling it would benefit me. Fortunately, it did. I didn't really get the sense that something was going to bubble over and actually happen, because that was so far removed from my brain, Jack Perry and CM Punk. I was still thinking about the Bucks and Punk, and I heard they had a little brush past and everything was fine, seemingly. People were on the edge of their seats, but once I heard about that, I was like, cool, everything's going to be good. I still get a little bit of PTSD covering the MJF stuff and the CM Punk stuff last year. So as far as on the scene versus at home, last year for the Double or Nothing and All Out stuff, I felt like being home really benefited me.
Sure.
Because you had goobers like Mark Madden saying, you should have went and knocked on MJF's hotel room door. I was like, come on.
Get the battering ram and
get the battering ram. Go do a welfare check on him, Sean Ross Sapp.
And Punk and Jack Perry had issues before, right? This is why he said the comment on the air about this is real glass. And I think you had reported on that earlier, right?
Yes. So at the Collision in Canada, when Perry had to go there to do a pre-tape, he was scheduled to go on vacation. He and Anna Jay were going to Hawaii. And in the interactions that I had with Punk's side of things, one of the comments was, because he didn't want to come to work next week. And there was no color added to that. It wasn't like, he was trying to get himself injured and not come to work next week, or he just didn't want to make a Dynamite date, or he didn't have or he had a vacation scheduled. There wasn't a lot of color painted to that. So I felt like that was important for him to be like, hey, this guy does have a vacation plan. Like, that is something that he's likely spent money on and had planned for, and his girlfriend probably planned for and spent money on. So in seeing stuff like that, I was like, well, that was a very CM Punk thing to say. Like, looking at the camera and saying it's real glass, cry me a river. I was like, that's something that CM Punk would have said in 2010, 2011. Or in 2023, for that matter.
Yeah, 2023. Like, obviously you're online and such. Are you aware right away that line is uttered on the broadcast? How quickly do you hear about that line being that you're in the stadium?
So in the media box, we had little monitors, and they often didn't work, and you couldn't hear anything. There was no commentary. Depending on the media box setup that you get, you might get the live feed, you might get the broadcast feed, you might get the in-house feed. There's several different ones that are available. Funny enough, we couldn't hear anything that was going on down there until the glass busted, and you could hear it all throughout Wembley. Like, it was loud. But I didn't know until I posted about that, and people posted the quote underneath. Then I was like, okay. And I thought it was funny. I thought it was a funny line. I thought it was good. It's the type of thing that if you know, and if you don't, who cares?
Well, It turned out to be a line that it made its way to the back, and thus the explosions occurred. And I will say this, like that night, like we go on, like we do our review of the show. That line is out there, the reaction is there, and I'm thinking like, this is another dust up. I don't feel this is like we're at a level 10 here. You fast forward to Monday, and it was just like this just precipitated so much more. And here we are, multiple days removed, and this is the dominant topic. So at this point, Sean, like what would be from your reporting, your best estimate in terms of what the status of Jack Perry and CM Punk stands at today in regards to AEW with this big week ahead of multiple nights in Chicago?
I'd be surprised if we saw either one of them on the All Out card. I don't even know if Jack Perry was planned for the All Out card, to be honest with you. Punk had prior obligations with the Cauliflower Alley Club and I believe a commentary gig as well. But it's going to hurt that crowd. It's going to hurt. I mean, it's going to affect the mood of a lot of that crowd because, quite frankly, let's be real. A lot of the people that are going to AEW All Out, they do not care what CM Punk does or doesn't do behind the scenes. They care about what he does on the screen, and they paid for their tickets to go watch him do that on screen. I'm working on tidying up some information about what the plans were for him this weekend, but as best I know, he was supposed to main event the show. I mean, as far as I'm aware, I wouldn't expect to see him, but also, from what I understand, this thing happened in pretty clear view of maybe Tony Khan. So it'd be hard for him to justify, oh yeah, just this one show, just this one or two shows. Let's bring him in and Rob Van Dam this. He can drop the Real World's title or whatever because, oh man, but it's AEW, so it's really, really hard to like sort of chop up what it is they're going to do because we don't even really know what they would have done to CM Punk had he not been injured. That injury at All Out sort of saved them a lot of grief with needing to punish him. If they did, if they didn't, we don't know because, oh man, it's a mess. It's a real mess.
There's no easy answer. There's no answer that doesn't leave one side aggrieved or harms your show on Sunday. And tonight, I think it's a really tough balancing act when it's not like you can even avoid the subject. Like you don't want to mislead your audience that this guy might be on the show and you're still selling tickets and people ordering the pay-per-view. You kind of have to make it known if this guy is not going to be on the show. And to your point, that this is how do you avoid a crowd that is going to be weighted in CM Punk's favor, turning on these shows, which is not something we've seen AEW crowds do, but that is another possibility of just CM Punk chants reverberating throughout these shows over the next couple of nights.
And then they're in Chicago starting tonight, right? They're in Schaumburg, Now Arena, and then Collision Saturday at United Center, and then of course the pay-per-view at United Center.
If you couldn't have a worse setup in terms of the calculus here and what you have to balance of accurately promoting like your shows and not raising expectation, because the audience, whether fair or not, are going to conclude that the company is holding our hometown hero away from us, who we want to see, and regardless of where what is fair in this whole situation of how you dole out any punishment.
Yeah, and as far as on screen, I mean, it ain't never going to happen, but I would have Kenny Omega say that he's politicking to keep Punk off the show because he's getting booed out of that arena Sunday anyway. Takeshita's going to be a huge babyface next Sunday. So, I mean, but I that's probably a violation of something that they have come to an agreement on anyway. Oh, man, it is absolutely terrible timing. It is just... And I know there are a lot of people that are like, oh my God, the Dirt Sheet guys must love this. I hate it. I truly loathe it. I hate having to reach out to CM Punk for anything. I hate covering this aspect of things. I would really much rather be reporting like, hey, this girl's contract is up in 3 months, or this person's heading to WWE, or WWE has secretly had this person signed for 6.5 months and has just sat on them forever. That's the type of stuff I would prefer to cover, but it's the old Joe Dirt method of it's not about you, it's about the consumer. And I can't just sell snakes and sparklers at my fireworks stand, unfortunately.
Are you getting a sense for what this is doing for AEW's morale? I got the impression when the initial brawl out happened a year ago, that there were a lot of people fed up with all of this drama and with Punk himself. He went away for many months and then came back, and it seemed like people. I mean, obviously there were at least some people willing to work with him, but this seems like another occasion for people to be fed up with him and all the drama surrounding him.
Yeah, because immediately after the brawl, there were people. Honestly, the majority of people that I talked to were more upset about what he said at the scrum than the fight. The fight was like the cherry on top, and it's like, come on, man. But he undermined the existence of the entire company at the scrum by being like, I worked with children. Nobody's ever been anywhere, done anything, when quite frankly, it was built on what they had to done in Chicago. And then when Bryan Danielson, Jon Moxley, and Jericho held that meeting, it really helped a lot of people, because you're going to say that those three have never done anything? Well, good luck, because, I mean, they've headlined about everywhere they could possibly headline. So them holding that meeting really seemed to help, because between All Out and that meeting, there were numerous people that were saying, this person will walk out if Punk comes back. I will walk out if Punk comes back. And time heals all wounds, ultimately. This one was another eye-rolling situation of like, this again? Really? This again? This is how it ends up? Like, you can talk about wanting to be a leader and wanting things done a certain way, but this stuff either it follows CM Punk, and ultimately there's one common denominator there. I respect the guy who sticks to his guns and won't take any crap or anything like that. But I mean, also in a corporate setting like that, you got to keep that type of stuff on the screen if at all possible.
Yeah, and I think it makes it very difficult. Like I'm sure, like all of us, like we have heard like pro Punk supporters and people that have been, on the other side of Punk of when it comes to this. And I would say that you can view this in terms of the larger picture of what Sean mentioned, of the common denominator here in Punk. Whereas if you're just assessing this in a vacuum on Sunday, I think that people would look at it was Jack Perry going into business for himself with this line and a guy coming up to him. And if it was left to that, I think you would have, like some people that would say you're overreacting to a situation, and others stating, listen, he was not the instigator here. But then and only we can't get into his head. But I think when you see the grievances that get aired out publicly from the Punk side, I think it does take away a lot of sympathy for Punk, that it paints himself into a certain light. And it gets very easy that if you're trying to win in the public, the court of public opinion, it becomes very easy to just paint him as a malcontent, even if there is more nuance to it.
And I understand, like, if somebody takes a shot at you, you walk up to him, you say, hey, do we have a problem and all that? And if it devolves from there, it devolves from there. But I mean, Jack Perry is 26 years old and did something that CM Punk at 30 was doing to make himself popular, to get himself over in one of his hottest angles ever. He was going.
It's very hard for him to put his foot down when we just had the Hangman segment a few weeks ago after Collision goes off the air. Like, it's very hard to be lead by example when the leader here is the one that is breaking his own quote unquote code.
Of course. And I mean, I cover the backstage drama of stuff pretty closely, and even the original Hangman comments I never picked up on until CM Punk had raised an issue about it backstage, and it got on my radar. Like, it was one of those things where I was just like,
talk about the workers' rights promo.
Yeah. It didn't even really register with me. And to me, I was like, building a pay-per-view. If we went back, I'd be like, that seems like the kind of thing that Punk would be like, hell yeah, let's sell some pay-per-views type of thing. Because that's ultimately what this is all about. It's easy for me to say, sitting here doing what I do, to be like, yeah, I would go up to that person and say, let's handle it on screen. Let's talk it out here and then handle it on screen and keep that between us. But obviously that isn't what Punk likes to do. Punk would rather throw down in a lot of senses.
So we also got this this report from Wade Keller at the Pro Wrestling Torch stating that the Torch had learned that Punk confronted Tony Khan in front of others and then in his locker room in what has been characterized as a heated, intense manner. And at one point, according to 3 sources who have heard about the situation, told Khan he quit and chewed out Khan with harsh phrasing. So that's another aspect to this, that it seems like there was some interaction between Punk and Tony Khan, which I understand was before the Jack Perry issue, that already it seemed like it was a contentious environment backstage before the Jack Perry line is even uttered on the program.
Yeah, I'm still working to find out some information on that. I heard the Jack Perry thing was in fairly plain view of like Tony Khan extras and some things like that. I don't know the specifics of the Tony Khan interaction, but I do know that CM Punk had said to multiple people things like, I hate it here, and had expressed frustration. And maybe that was hyperbole on his part, but I mean, I know that was a direct quote from him. As like, well, I can't believe this is how people act. I hate it here type of thing.
And I mean, it's again, like, it's obviously there were some extreme emotions that are running at this point that you're seeing. The larger point is just the fact that, listen, you have Collision. It's been built around this individual. It is not as simple as just stating, okay, this is a problem. We have to eliminate the problem. There is a lot invested in CM Punk. And it seems to be like, the question is, do you make a gigantic wholesale change that is going to have short-term a detriment to your company? Or do we just continue with what has been a pattern of these forest fires that Tony Khan is going to have to put out every couple of weeks, even though these fires do not appear to be extinguished?
I know one thing. If I'm Edge, my asking price just went up to head up Collision. I mean, like, you need a marquee name.
He's in a great leverage position. Absolutely. Because you are like, this Saturday show needs to work. It needs to be very successful. And you're going into a very heated fall season when it comes to the competition only getting stiffer.
Tony Khan's got the binoculars out on Impact 1000 to see if Devon Dudley can still work, like anything like that to bring some familiarity and star power to that show. But yeah, legitimately, if you're Edge, if you're Mercedes Moné, if you're people like that, they need anchors for that show. Like, I think Juice and Switchblade have been incredibly big winners on that show.
Certainly.
But a guy like Miro needs to be utilized more. You can't. CM Punk has made it the CM Punk show to the point to where talent relations guys can't be at the show. Like,
I think that's the wildest story, Sean. Like, that's the one to me. Like, that was the
Christopher
one
Daniels there, right?
Yeah,
I think that was the one that it was like, that one floored me. Like that one, like, of all the other things, it's like, you like maybe some of them don't make sense, but that one was astounding to me.
Yeah, and I mean, Tony Khan has long wanted Goldberg, but Goldberg isn't going to be there for any extended period of time. Like, he'll pop in, pop out. But I think you have to have almost a CM Punk contingency plan in the event that this happens, because you just don't know what you're going to get in that sense and how things might adjust or change. And is he a draw? Objectively, yes. And I think that AEW views him as a bigger headache outside the company as inside. And if you need any example of that, go back and listen to the Colt Cabana podcast that, quite frankly, helped start all this that we're still seeing today. You can trace every single bit of this back to Royal Rumble 2014. We are almost on year 10 of the saga, starting from the concussion to the podcast where he talked about it, to the lawsuit, to the breakdown of that relationship, to him joining AEW, to people thinking that he pushed Colt Cabana out, to his feud with the Elite. And only now has it just like kind of sparked off its own little thing completely separate of that. But the behavior is reflective of that as well. Oh, man. I just can't believe this is still going on.
And thinking in terms of leadership, one thing we've talked about over the last few weeks is, apparently these guys, and I mean by that, Punk and the Elite, they haven't sat down and had a conversation. It doesn't seem like anyone has successfully gotten them together to try to mediate them. I mean, is there? I know there's only so much we can say sitting here, but do you get the sense that that AEW has the personnel that has the trust of Punk to that extent, so that they can actually have a conversation? Because it seems like we're all we get, as John has written, are these passive aggressive shots, on television, which is only getting people more angry with each other and leading to exactly what happened at All Out or All In.
I know that CM Punk says that he wants to, and he says that the Bucks and Kenny don't want to. So according to CM Punk, he wants to get into a room and talk to everybody. But when I think of everybody, I mean, you got to get Colt in that room too. Because I mean, that was sort of what launched a lot of this. And just because they got into a fight doesn't mean it's going to all be solved or anything like that. But I do think that they at least need to be on cordial terms, to the point to where 4 of the biggest names in the company need to be on the same page in a professional working relationship. I'll give you a good example. When a lot of the Thunder Rosa, Britt Baker stuff came out, people said, well, why didn't you report on their drama before? Because they just shut up and worked with each other. That's why. They didn't like each other. But if I ran a report on everybody in wrestling that doesn't like each other, well, that would be like all that we do. But a lot of these people just say, I'll work with you. Don't like you. We'll get in there. We'll handle our business. Then we ain't talking on Tuesday or Thursday or whatever it is. I don't think, from my experience and conversations, that the Young Bucks and Kenny are interested in that conversation. And for a long time, I was saying, well, they shouldn't be. They should use it to leverage their new contracts, which I'm told they did. Because what do they benefit by mending those fences before they get money to mend those fences? And now I just haven't heard of any particular interest on their side either. And I think they're well within their right in that case.
Yeah, and listen, it's like none of us have like a horse in the race here, but like if you're looking at it from that side, like from their perspective, I'm sure they can look at the the night of All Out, we went to go sit down and speak. I don't think anyone, even people that are anti-elite in this whole discussion, believe they showed up at that locker room to initiate a fight with CM Punk. And it's like that was we tried to go talk, and look what the end result of that was. So we're the talking part. Like, listen, we'll all exist in our little silos here, but as we're seeing now, this extends beyond just those parties at All Out. It is permeated into other areas, and here we are on a Wednesday, and this pay-per-view on Sunday is like, this has an absolute effect on business, and for 3 nights in Chicago could elicit a very hostile environment that is not going to be a shining moment for the company potentially.
Yeah, and they got really lucky that WBD was just like, you want a primetime show on Saturdays by chance? It might fix some stuff. My God, man. Like that was a golden platter opportunity. Like, just here you go. That you don't just get primetime cable TV shows just handed to you very often, much less one that can help rectify a lot of situations like this. But it just wasn't handled. Something needed to happen. Like when you hear that he's sending Ryan Nemeth home and keeping Matt Hardy and possibly Ethan Page, but Isaiah Cassidy and Christopher Daniels off the show, you should probably step in and be like, my company can't do that. Learn, like, your issue was physically with these people. You don't need to keep these people away.
And once you are handing over that power, like, you are essentially like this does come down at the end, like of a Tony Khan, you are going to utilize as much power as is provided to you. And, he is somebody that has clearly, seen his influence, knows the importance that he holds. I am most curious if cell phones are going to be allowed inside of tonight's speech when CM Punk receives the Mike Mazurki Award and is going to speak at the podium. And knowing Phil Brooks, I would assume like he is not just going to be going up there for a thanks a lot without having something to say with all of this. I don't feel this will just be him giving some quick.
He's getting Cauliflower Alley's highest honor, I read.
Wow. I think you would be right. I think you would be right. I expect him to take a shot or say something. But Yeah, it's one of those things where I understand where in his eyes, he doesn't want anybody poisoning his Collision well. Doesn't even want to run the risk of it. However, in sort of forcing people off the show, I feel like maybe it did poison the well. But I certainly see his side of things where he looks at it and he goes, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't even have these people on here because this could cause an issue. But in the same sense, saying you got to get the hell out of here, that causes an issue.
It is hard when you're this deep of seeing the forest from the trees. And I believe Punk believes that this is he is not a guy that is trying to wreck this locker room or tear down this company. I think he has in his mind the right intentions, but there is a moment where I think all parties have to stand back and look at what is the state of all of this. And this cannot continue. That is the conclusion. And seeing Tony Khan get up at that press conference on Sunday, and he has just achieved the biggest accomplishment business-wise of his life. And the first thing he has to do is address this investigation and a backstage incident. And he'll poker face it and no comment. But that had to be the last thing that guy wanted to be dealing with on the day of this gigantic achievement for the company.
Yeah, for sure. And with the CM Punk level of things, like I think he has a pretty clear view of what he thinks a successful and cohesive locker room is. And that's how he wants his locker room to perform. The guidelines that were created, I think, were largely pushed by CM Punk. Because, I mean, there were some pretty specific things in there. And also there was a little line that Ricky Starks threw at him, which I'm surprised didn't cause any issues, where Ricky Starks said, I'm going to walk to the back. My music's going to hit, and y'all are going to pretend that I didn't just come out here. That was a little fun dig at CM Punk, as best I know, because he's very particular about music only being played for people who are advertised to come to the ring. So that was one of those things. And I saw it and I go, uh-oh, is Ricky going to get into a fight? But he's also got one of the most disarming personalities in the history of pro wrestling. So, I mean, I look at that and I'm like, well, that went well, or maybe it went over Punk's head or something like that. But also I see the level in which Punk has micromanaged some aspects of Collision. And I'm like, well, he very clearly has a design in mind for how this show will appear in sort of his image with his reputation and a lot of things associated with it. Yeah. And I see somebody in the chat saying that was all planned. To the level in which Ricky Starks said it, it wouldn't have made sense. There was no context within the show that CM Punk didn't like music played unless he wanted to. And Ricky often just kind of throws stuff out there.
And this is all coming at a pretty inopportune time with the addition of Collision. I think they're getting a little bit more money, at least to cover the cost of the additional production. But we're really waiting to see, where is Collision going to end up averaging? They're on the precipice of facing a lot of college football competition for this show, and it's going to weigh heavily into whatever the value is of their next TV deal. And whatever their ratings are going to be heavily affected, at least to somewhat extent, is going to be affected by whether or not their biggest star is going to be on these shows. And if this relationship happens to be, unfixable, then their ratings are going to suffer, and perhaps their TV deal is going to suffer.
Yeah. And the TV deal for them is particularly interesting. And I've mentioned this before because they are not a publicly traded company. Tony Khan and his investors deem what they consider a success. If they consider profiting $1 a success and they want to reinvest every single bit of money that they make back into free agency, they can choose to do that. With WWE, they have to answer to shareholders and all that. And there's certainly a different aspect of that. I'm just so interested to see how this TV deal in WWE's affects the massive free agency year next year, and how the massive free agency year next year subsequently affects ratings, because we have huge names possibly coming on the board from WWE and possibly AEW too, depending on if any of them have injury time added.
We have a super chat here from Richard. Thank you for the chat. Hello, Sean Ross Sapp. Question is, who will be at AEW Collision on Saturday?
Who will be at AEW Collision on Saturday? I don't think CM Punk is going to be there. I would expect FTR to be there to set up their show. As best I know, Ricky Starks is supposed to be there. Bullet Club Gold's supposed to be there. I thought Andrade's been sidelined. When I asked, I was told that he was sidelined. He was supposed to be there. I think Scorpio might still be hurt. Joe's supposed to be there. Your typical colliders, it's pretty straightforward. And Christian and Luchasaurus. I'm sure Miro will still be there too, despite the fact that everybody thought that they were beefing there for a little bit. But then again,
someone's arriving in a taxi.
Somebody's arriving in a taxi. I think it'll be your usual collision group. But if CM Punk isn't there, maybe they're like, hey, we got to squeeze the Young Bucks and Kenny on the show. Like, why not?
Do you expect pretty much like tonight you have to, I would think, establish this entire card? What do you think about this experiment, like throwing out the CM Punk stuff, just even if you had Punk on the card, of doing the pay-per-views back-to-back weekends, and what your expectation is for fans coming back a second week in a row for a pay-per-view?
Well, ideally, it'd be coupled with a Max deal or a streaming deal or something, because I think that back-to-back pay-per-view weekends is a very, very big ask for your audience. So I think that's a little tough. But I remember when I was speaking to people from WBD, they were pointing and they circled this week as like, this is a major week. And that was before the All In announcement. They're like, this week is going to be huge. And I was like, oh, All Out. And they're like, not just All Out. And to me, if I were AEW, I would have gathered everybody in a room and said, this week is integral for us. It is imperative that we say that we are the top company this week. And I'm talking Dynamite, Rampage, Collision, All In, All Out. You tie up every loose end. You finally put the Swerve Keith Lee match on a show or something. You put pay-per-view quality or level matchups or matches with stakes the entire week long. I think it should have been a week where they sort of dominated the airwaves in that sense, and it wrapped with All Out. The way that it
part
is
of the thinking there is that that's sort of the last 2 weeks before other sports competition really comes in.
Yes, exactly. Because they got, they're fortunate in that there's no football this weekend. They're switching back to Saturdays Saturdays for a lot of pay-per-views once football starts, except for Wrestle Dream, which is interesting if they did a Sunday there. But I think that has to do with the Jags being overseas and perhaps the convenience of if they miss that one, sure. But I mean, they're about to face a ton of competition, and I think that what they want to do is look at who they can drag in before football season starts and how that will affect them moving forward, whether it be with delayed viewers, live viewers, pay-per-view viewers, television viewers. I think this is their effort in their effort to sort of be like, hey, don't forget about us when football's on, please.
So as you are continuing to report on this story, Sean, what are some of the biggest questions on your mind that are still unanswered regarding this, as we're going into a Tony Khan media availability as well on Thursday, that you have to imagine this is going to be one of the key topic?
I would imagine at the top of the show, he's going to say that he can't comment on it. And that will be that.
Tonight's Dynamite or the media call?
Probably both.
Probably both. But I think specifically the media call, he'll be like, I can't comment on this. I can't comment on anything related to this. It's an ongoing investigation. We will keep you updated. Thank you. I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
And I just see that being like tonight. It's just like, I do feel you have to play fair with your audience, and that if this guy's not on the pay-per-view, like this is not, there's not going to be some surprise. And like, if he's off, I think you have to make it clear, because you are going to have a very disappointed audience if he is not showing up. And
you're going to leave people wondering, is he going to do a run-in or something?
Yeah, it really does have the effect of this big backlash against the company, because it will be Chicago versus AEW. That is how it's going to be framed over these 3 nights. It's a very unenviable position to be in, and one they should not be in. Like this should have been the ultimate celebratory week for AEW coming off of Sunday. And maybe we're all so deep into it. But it does feel like a lot of that goodwill oxygen from Wembley was evaporated in very quick fashion because of the story. And that has to be the ultimate kicker in this, if you're AEW and Tony Khan.
And I know that was a thing that bummed out Tony Khan about the brawl at Brawl Out, was because it sort of overshadowed a really great main event that they had. And that was the thing.
And MJF's big return, like that was that was immediately
Yeah.
forgotten about within an hour.
Which there weren't many people that were feeling bad for MJF considering the Double or Nothing thing and the attention that took away from everything else. But yeah, I don't hear anybody ever talk about that Moxley Punk match now because everybody talks about the scrum and what happened immediately after. So ultimately, I think when all is said and done, this won't necessarily overshadow things in the long run quite the way that Brawl Out overshadowed that pay-per-view, because I think the magnitude of this show certainly was much more than that of AEW All Out 2022.
My last question for you, Sean. Years from now, how do you think we will look back at this Wembley Stadium show? Like, obviously, they're going to go back next year. And to me, this is established All In as the big show of the year for the company. And I think like this is going to be one that is looked upon as one of the seismic events in like this century for a pro wrestling company.
I hope so. I mean, they already have long-term plans there, obviously. And when WWE went there a year later, they were frigid in that territory. And in wrestling in general, they fell off quite a bit. Hopefully that doesn't happen in this case. It looks like wrestling is hot right now. It's a thing that Cody constantly brings up, is that it's the most rewarding time financially within the industry to be a part of it, whether it be covering it or wrestling. And we're about to hit some possible major TV deals as well. So I think that the fact that they sold this show also, it helps eliminate some of the pressure on them to tour throughout Europe and the incredible cost that could be. Because I think that this show being on this weekend and only this weekend and no Dynamite, no Collision there was their way of saying, you want to come see us on this continent? Here's how you get here. Here's how it happens. It's a long weekend. Let's do this. I don't know if they'll ever do 81,000 again. I hope they do. I hope they get so white hot. I hope next year we're talking about CM Punk and Kenny Omega headlining the show and them selling 90,000 or something like that. But right now it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like that's the direction we're going to be headed.
And if I could ask you one WWE question.
Sure.
The merger is, according to Endeavor's last earnings release, merger is mid to late September is when they expect it to be completed, which is a narrower time window than before. I'm hearing from employees that maybe they're expecting it even earlier than that, in the earlier part of September. And there's a lot of unknowns, obviously, for employees, just in terms of layoffs, which I expect to be pretty big. And
pretty vast.
They don't know about whether benefits are going to carry over in the same way, time off, all that stuff. Just wondering if you're hearing the same or anything like that.
Similar. That's what people are expecting for sure. And I mean, I know that people that have gotten signed within the company are even expecting like, yeah, we probably won't even debut until like September or whenever the merger is done, just for the sake of it. But yeah,
they're holding off on signing talent. Somewhat.
Well, they've signed some talent. I know for a fact they have signed some talent fairly recently. It's just that since Vince wrote his little declaration letter that he wanted to come back and seek a deal, there have been no main roster debuts of signings since that moment. Like there were some that were signed before that. But I get the feeling, and it's just a hunch, that they're kind of waiting to put those people on TV, because you never know. I don't know if cuts will extend to talent or anything like that. People, unfortunately, on staff are expecting it, which, sucks and is an unfortunate reality of mergers.
Yeah. I mean, all of us followed like the UFC sale and how that just like got, they gutted areas as well. It's hard not to look at that and imagine like that's just the reality of these types of mergers and why they are attractive to these large scale companies. Well, on that note, Sean, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I know a lot of our viewers and listeners are already members at FightfulSelect.com, but if not, get yourself subbed up. And Sean, will you be celebrating your birthday later today with Jimmy Van?
I will be. I'll be on the hump after that. I will not be on the post AEW show. I'm going to see Offspring, Sum 41, and Simple Plan tonight.
Oh my goodness.
I'm excited for that.
Well, I hope it's a quiet night then for your sake. I hope there's nothing coming out of Cauliflower Alley Club that deters you from traveling back to the late 90s.
Are you going to Chicago this weekend or
I'm not. I'm not. Today's my birthday. Saturday is my wife's. Monday is our anniversary. Wow. And WWE's running their pay-per-view Saturday. So it was like, let me just stay at home. We have
Brandon's doing both. He's hitting the road, man. This is this is indie worker Brandon Thurston making the towns this weekend.
We're very fortunate. We have a wonderful girl, Iridian Fierro, who is going to be at StarCast and AEW covering the show for us. So I'm very excited for that.
We'll go follow all of Sean's great work and his whole team at Fightful.com and FightfulSelect.com. Thanks so much, Sean, for jumping on with us. This was an excellent chat, and just based on the comments, I think a lot of people enjoyed this a lot. We'll have to do this again because I can promise there will always be more chaos that is going on in the world of professional wrestling.
Yeah,
thank you
all.
Live
so
stream
much. Number is any indication. Sean Ross Sapp is a draw.
Put the bloodline aside, okay? The quarter-hour rise throughout the show has been, I think, Sean Ross Sapp a confirmed draw. Clearly,
well, Brandon
puts out the quarter hours, you'll see.
I need the minute by minutes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, we fortunately we have first-party data here, so we're good.
You know what? I know a guy. I'm going to get Fast Nationals.
Okay. On that note, Sean Ross Sapp, have a great one and happy birthday, Sean.
Happy birthday.
All right. That was a great chat with Sean and getting all up to date. We did get a handful of super chats there that I'm going to get to now from Glassdoor Gamer, who writes, pre-Punk, we didn't hear much about backstage drama at AEW. From January to June, AEW issues, other than Punk's Instagram stuff, seemed fine too. Common denominator. And that's probably going to be the opinion of a lot of people of, the issues that have at least escalated here. Next up, we have a question that I know Brandon will like. Hey guys, what if this was all scripted by Tony Khan as a way to keep AEW on everyone's lips with free PR? Tony Khan has been writing very long-term stories.
Mm-hmm.
This is all work, Brandon.
It's all work, brother.
Because this has been a glowing week of headlines for AEW since All In ended. This has been a total positive for them, has it not?
I actually watched All In with somebody who works in wrestling, who may even be listening eventually here. And he brought up to me, I think maybe some of it's work. It's not a work. It's not. It's not helping their business. I mean, yes, it's creating a wrestling media story, but I don't see it.
I've seen the least of that
business
coming out of this one.
Yes.
But I mean, that's always going to exist in wrestling with that skepticism. Why isn't the suspension? And this is from Curly Mustache FTW, because I'm obligated to read every user handle here. Why isn't the suspension addressed publicly with Punk and others, as opposed to the times with Jimmy Havoc getting fired and Sammy Guevara suspended years ago? That does bring up an aspect to this whole thing, Brandon, is the fact that there are legal representatives involved, and I think there is that in the back of your mind of, is the end game of all of this some kind of lawsuit if things truly go sour? And I think that is certainly a concern on AEW's part as well, of the legal issues. And if a lawsuit comes out of this at the end of the day, if this is ultimately the parties blow up and cannot work with each other anymore, I think you could be looking at some contentious legal battle at the end of all of this that they are hopefully trying to avoid.
Yeah, I think they came close to being involved in a legal battle a year ago too, after the incident last year. And my impression is that Punk is, become somewhat litigious. I think particularly after the Dr. Aman lawsuit, and it's a real possibility. And I do have my pacer search, Phil Brooks,
on standby. Andy writes in, why do you think WWE has gone off the boil after SummerSlam? Was it intentional to take a breather? Are there big plans after Payback? Maybe you can ask Paul Levesque this on Saturday. Why is programming taken a bit of a lull the last 4 weeks? Are you guys planning a return afterwards? I think it's not like this company's fallen off a cliff since SummerSlam. I mean, you do have Roman Reigns. He's, on a bit of a hiatus right now. But going into this does segue into one of our topics here, that John Cena is going to be back for an extended stay beyond just SmackDown on Friday and the India show. He is then, after September 8th in India, doing 7 straight weeks of SmackDown through the end of October. And
he's skipping Boston, though.
He is skipping Boston?
Boston is the one SmackDown that he's not on over this.
Oh, that's the September 8th show.
Yes,
oh,
yes.
Interesting. Well, that clearly the man, can't be in two places at once, I guess. But yeah, I mean, if this does coincide with Roman Reigns being off for a period of time, that is certainly a hell of a Band-Aid to have John Cena for 2 months, no less.
Right. It's SmackDown, so it's not like it's going to be going against football where Raw is, but it should help the ratings. We saw a big rating with the tributes to Bray Wyatt and Terry Funk on the most recent SmackDown. but it should certainly help their ratings. He appeared December 30th last year for the tag match that he did.
Yes,
and it did a really strong rating. SmackDown has repeatedly done over the last 9 months or so. Repeatedly, it's hit this benchmark of this was the highest since December 25th, 2020, and that was one of them.
We also had just some of the press conference notes from Tony Khan. So the announced paid attendance, and I totally attribute the man to your right on the screen for having this paid number reported, 81,035 at Wembley Stadium, which there's no reason to believe that this is not an accurate number of the paid figure. But it's astounding to me that I don't know how many other promoters that would go with the smaller number than what they could have got. Like, they could have announced the number with comps and just had what is the highest number possible we could get. Instead, they announced a paid figure that to me is going to be that is a number that WWE cannot just snap their fingers and top that number. And for all intents and purposes, at least from Tony Khan's data, this would be the highest paid figure in wrestling history, which Brandon has exhaustively researched more than anyone at this point when it comes to WrestleMania 3 and WrestleMania 32 that seem to be the other candidates.
Yeah, so it's probably the highest. I will say that it's probably the highest. They certainly can say it, and I can't definitively dispute it, that it is the highest paid attendance ever. WrestleMania 32, as we've said many times, looks like it was about 80,000. It could have been a little bit more, a little bit less. Don't know. WrestleMania 3.
Wrestlenomics.com.
Yeah. I get these days, it changes by the day, in my opinion, but I lean towards Dave's report that 75,800, I think he's reported, for the paid number for the Silverdome WrestleMania 3, 75,800. Yeah, that's a little less than the 81,035. Did I get it right? I got to memorize that.
8135.
Yeah. Really curious. Why do you think they chose paid attendance and not just this is our attendance? Or because clearly, I believe this is a legitimate number. I believe this is the actual number of tickets that were sold. So why do you think they were specific about that?
I think that Tony Khan is very aware that this is a guy that is very data driven, and I think he is very aware of the Pole Stars of the world, of the Brandon Thurstons of the world, that this is a number that WWE cannot just come out and announce a figure. Ultimately, I think this was a number that was as much announced for the people that are following the WWE KPIs, that this is a figure that will take some real effort for WWE to be able to legitimately top, as opposed to him just announcing attendance plus comps. It opens WWE to be able to, it almost is like we're getting away from the fictitious number, and that's a game WWE can't play with us.
Yeah, W's numbers include who knows what their real formula is. We got those emails from the Royal Rumble showing how they were including all the personnel and some security outside and maybe some suites that weren't being occupied and things like that. Yeah.
Then how about the announcement that they will do Wembley Stadium next year? Were you surprised at all? And maybe we shouldn't have been. This was an enormous success. And maybe the only surprise was that this is an event to me. This can be your traveling stadium show every year, but they are staying in London. And there's a lot of reasons to want to stay in such a major tourist hub like London is. And when you drew 81,000+ people, even next year, if they do 65, that's an enormous success for AEW. But right. Yeah, it also opens it, which Tony Khan discussed, the idea you could do some TVs there. You could expand beyond just the single day event.
Right. And it will help them if All In continues to be a very profitable show, it'll help them sustain maybe a wider tour throughout Europe and the UK. I think, the one takeaway I got here is that, I realized it now. It's been true all along that Tony Khan really loves tradition. He loves a pattern. He loves to do something again and again. And if I had considered that, I would have been like, oh yeah, of course they're going to do this. But yeah, it's I guess we were talking last Sunday on Wrestlenomics Radio. What the cost according to Sport Business, the interview they did with Tony Khan. There's a mentioning in there by the author that the cost to rent Wembley Stadium was about $400,000 or $500,000, I believe. So that doesn't include logistics and security, and then of course that doesn't include the production of the show, which I'm guessing was well over $1 million, maybe $2 million. So I kind of did the math, and so they draw even like 20,000 or 30,000. That probably at least breaks even for them just on ticket sales, not to mention what they do on pay-per-view or if there's some sort of media max deal by then. So it's something they can do. I think there's perception issues to think about if you have an empty stadium there that's only like half full. But financially, it should make sense.
And they will, in fact, be coming back. So this month, you've got All Out, which is this Sunday. Then you have the Arthur Ashe Stadium show on September the 20th. And then another pay-per-view, Sunday, October 1st, which will be in coordination with the 1-year anniversary of Antonio Inoki's passing, which will be dubbed Wrestle Dream, which is back-to-back nights paired with Collision that weekend at the Climate Pledge Arena, which they drew very well for their first time in the market earlier this year. Back-to-back nights in Seattle. And it will bring up a question of, it seemed Tony Khan very much wants New Japan talent on this show, but as it's been pointed out, most of the roster is working at Cork-Ewan Hall that day for a Road to Destruction show. So I don't know how much New Japan talent would even be available, but this is obviously Tony Khan is expanding his belief of what the audience is willing to spend on in terms of pay-per-view content and adding pay-per-views, which we had seen was clearly the path they were going towards.
Yeah, it'll be curious to see what the pay-per-view schedule is like going forward, because now we're going to have, we could say, was there a pay-per-view in June? Yes, there's Forbidden Door at the end of June, and there's no pay-per-view in July, but there's one in August.
Ring of Honor, if you want to include that.
True. And then August, there was one in August, All In. There'll be All Out in September. It'd be interesting to see what the buys are going to be for All Out, but and then there's going to be one in October, right? And then there'll be Full Gear in November. Will there be a Winter
Final
is coming.
Battle in December? Like we're pretty much at this point now where you're almost at like a monthly pay-per-view cycle between AEW and Ring of Honor. And also for that Full Gear weekend, this had been our question. What do you do during football season? They will do Full Gear on a Saturday night from the Kia Forum, and Collision will move to the Friday night for that week only in an 8 to 10 slot, which Tony Khan did not state, but it would seem like that creates a 3-hour window on TNT with Rampage immediately following it. I don't see them just scrapping Rampage that week. So you might have not just a 3-hour block, but our first Collision versus SmackDown head-to-head.
From 8, starting at 8.
Well, that's when Collision starts. Isn't that what Tony Khan stated at the press conference? It would be
I
8
missed
till
that.
10?
You might be right, though. I'll have to look.
Yeah, I imagine it's in its regular time slot the night before, but maybe that can be confirmed on the
and this which date again is this?
This would be Friday, November 17th. Collision would air, and then Saturday is the Full Gear pay-per-view.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. I guess it could start at 10 and go to 10, 11, and at 1 a.m. But yeah, that could be a head-to-head SmackDown versus Collision.
Yes. All right. Well, the hour is up. Brandon is a busy man, but we got a lot across in this show. A great show. A big thank you to Sean Ross Sapp for joining us. And for those that maybe are listening to us for the first time, you can follow all of Brandon's great work, patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. And on the Post Wrestling side, postwrestlingcafe.com is where you can go to support our sites as well. Tonight, Wei Ting and I will be live right after Dynamite in Hoffman Estates, Illinois. It is the post-Dynamite, post-Cauliflower Alley Club review show, as I'm sure we will be seeking out any correspondence from Las Vegas.
Where's the Cauliflower Alley banquet? Is it Las Vegas?
Vegas, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So no Punk on tonight's show. I don't think that. I think that's a very, very safe bet, and I guess it will remain to be seen. But the man who will be on the scene this weekend, Brandon Thurston, in Pittsburgh for Payback on Saturday, then at All Out on Sunday. And I'm sure there will be no shortage of interesting news that we will have to dissect next week on the show.
Yeah, I've got a Sunday. We do Wrestlenomics Radio only for subscribers. That's along with TV ratings reports and a lot of other reports. That's what you get as a subscriber for just $5. But I'm planning on doing Wrestlenomics Radio perhaps from Midway Airport, because I'll be about to no. Where will I be? I think I'll be in Pittsburgh. I think I'll be doing from the airport. And does that make sense? No, Midway, because I'll be going home. I think I'll be at the airport though. You know, some people might cancel it or reposition it. Now I'm just gonna do it where I am.
The
with
man
this
is
headset and this laptop.
The man will bring you Wrestlenomics Radio each and every week, along with Chris Gullo and Jesse Collins. So tune into that Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for patrons at patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. So again, a thank you to Sean Ross Sapp. Thank you for all your super chats and those tuning in live. And we will be back next Wednesday for another edition of Pollock and Thurston.